This is going to go along with task sheet 395 on cylinder leakage testing. Unfortunately, I don't have a leak down tester to do a demo on this, but I just want to talk about it just a little bit. Honestly, I've probably only had to do this a handful of times over the years to try and track down a really slight compression loss. But you may need to from time to time, so it's something that you kind of need to know how to do, whether or not you do it frequently. But we're gonna hook this up like we would a engine compression tester through the spark plug hole, and we're putting shop air into the cylinder, and we're gonna measure and kind of see how much leaks out. So there usually is a spec for that. You usually don't want a whole lot of leakage. You want to be up in the 90% sealed area. Like I said, there's going to be a spec for that. And when I go and set these things up, typically the way I do it is I take an extension, a 3/8 extension, and put it in the spark plug hole. And you're going to turn this engine over by hand, and as the piston comes up, it's going to raise this extension up. I may need a little bit longer one than this, but you're going to go take this all the way up until it quits moving, and then you're going to be pretty close. And you can hook up your gauge, put a little air in there, and see how it looks. You may have to turn the crank a little bit back and forth to get it to seal up all the way. But that's typically how I run through that. One thing to note, if you're doing this on something like my truck, that's a V engine. Since this extension is going to be at an angle, sometimes it gets a little bit too far and it wants to bind in there. So if you're doing this on a V engine, you need to make sure that you're not getting this thing stuck, and you don't want to damage anything. So you kind of have to guide it along as it's coming up out of that spark plug hole. Make sure we're not hurting anything. If you're having trouble getting things to seal up, really the only other thing you can do, and sometimes I would do this right off the bat depending on the engine, is pull the valve cover off and pull your rocker arms off of there so that you know that your valves are closed. So you can't really do that on an overhead cam engine. You have to pull a cam out, which is way too much work for just doing a test. But if you pull that valve cover off, at least you can look at the cam and look at the valves and everything and make sure that everything is actually closed and you're not kind of coming up on that cam lobe. So sometimes you need to pull a valve cover. So just keep that in mind. If not, then I'd try the extension way first. If we can complete this test in the smallest amount of work as possible, that's kind of what we're shooting for with a lot of this stuff. I don't know about you guys, but I'm kind of lazy. I like to find the easiest and fastest way to do pretty much anything. So, and when we're working on commission, that's a big part of it. So, as far as the task sheets go, I'd say fill it out the best you can. I know you guys don't have access to all data or anything like that, but on this truck, I would assume we probably have 85% or so sealing. Just a guess. I think I do have a little bit of weak rings going on. This truck does burn a little bit of oil, so if I was losing anything, that's probably where it'd be from. But just remember, we're going to pump this thing up full of air. We're going to listen for air leaking out around the tailpipe, at the throttle plate, indicating valving issues, something like that. If it is rings, we might be able to hear some air coming out of the oil fill cap. And then lastly, if we have a head gasket problem, you pop that radiator cap off and look for any kind of bubbles in there. So if your engine's out running, you shouldn't have any bubbles coming out. So that's another little indication there that you could have some issues. So fill that out the best that you can. If you have any questions, get with me or we can talk about it in the chat. So on to the next.